All right, so it says a farmer feeds his cattle herd with hay every day in July. The amount of hay in his barn at the end of day n is given by the arithmetic sequence u sub n equals 100 minus 2.7 n. Now, now when we talked yesterday about arithmetic sequences, we talked about the explicit formula, and we talked about how to find the sum of arithmetic sequences as well, or arithmetic series. One of the things that I highlighted or that I kind of put off to the side before I went into series was like, okay, sometimes you'll be asked what is the general term for u sub n or what's the explicit formula, and I basically showed you in one particular problem how to do that. If you're like, I don't remember us doing this, well, these are the exact same notes from the other day, and it was right here in the blue, okay, where you could write a general rule or an expression for the nth term, and I boxed it in yellow, okay, basically where you plug in your first term, your common difference, and you simplify to get basically a general expression that you can use to find any term in the sequence. Any term in the sequence. I also noted that the number that's attached to the n is your common difference for that respective sequence as well. And so when you look at this form right here, this is the explicit formula for this arithmetic sequence that represents the amount of hay in his barn at the end of each day, okay? Where n represents your number of days. So you use that to find different terms in the sequence. You can also use it to find the common difference. You can also use it to find the 25th term. And you can also use it to find how much hay is at the barn at the beginning of August. Okay? So that is going to be used for every single one of these problems. Now it says to write down the amount of hay in the barn on the first 3 days of July. Now the words write down means that it's either little work or no work at all, meaning that the answer is somewhere like staring you in the face. But it should not take much to try to figure out what the amount of hay in the barn is on the first 3 days of July. What you're doing is you're basically finding u sub 1, u sub 2, and u sub 3. Because remember, n represents the day. So day 1, day 2, day 3. So you plug in 1 into n into this explicit formula to find that. What was u sub 1? How much hay was left in the barn at the end of the first day? So we get 97.3 for, let's see, 97.3. And this is a word problem, so we want to make sure we include our units. Okay? What about on day 2? What do we get on day 2?
94.6.
94.6. And what do we get on day 3?
91.9.
91.9. Okay? That involved very little work. All you had to do was plug in 1, 2, and 3 into the formula to get your 3 days. Okay? Now, part B asks you to find and interpret the common difference. Well, remember, for arithmetic sequences, to find the common difference, all we need to do is take our second term and subtract it from our first term. Okay? Algebraically, this is how you would do it. So you take that 94.6 that we found in part A and subtract it from our 97.3 that, again, we also found in part A. And don't we get negative 2.7?
Yes.
Yes, we do. We do get negative 2.7. Just like how I said before, that value that's attached to your variable is always your common difference. Every single time whenever you're given the simplified explicit formula. Okay? Now interpret the common difference. Okay? This is applications and interpretations. So at times you will be asked to interpret what that respective number means, which means you have to, in context of the problem, what does that mean? Does anybody have an idea of what that negative 2.7 means in context of the problem? Like relating it back to the problem?
you're losing that much amount of hay each day.
And that right there, what you just said, you will write it down in a sentence. You just want to make sure that you include the number when you do. Okay? So you're losing. Losing would indicate that minus 2.7 tonnes of hay daily. That's what that means. That's how you interpret what that number represents. Anytime you interpret, you always want to make sure that you include the number in there as well. Questions on B?
Instead of losing 2.7, couldn't we just say that that's how much the farmer feeds his cattle herd?
Yes, you could say that. It's feeding 2.7 tons of hay to his cattle herd. Yes. We definitely don't want to say negative 2.7, though, in any way that we describe it. Okay? You want to interpret what that minus means. Losing. The cows are eating. His original amount is decreasing. Now we have to find and interpret use of 25. So for this, we want to plug in 25 into n. Into our explicit formula that's already been simplified for us. No need to recreate the wheel. It's already been given to us, so let's use it. So for part C, we're going to plug in 25, n for n, and then we're going to solve. What you guys get?
I got 32.5.
Very good. So it'll be 32.5 tons. I'll just say it's tons. Okay, always make sure that you include your units. Always make sure that you include your units. And so what does that mean? Interpret that in context of the problem.
I said he is feeding 32.5 tons on the 25th day, but I don't.
He's feeding, okay, that would work. 32.5 tons to his cattle. All right. Anyone else?
Oh no, that's all I had. I was just seeing if it was right or not.
No, that would work. That would definitely work. Did anybody have any it worded differently? Okay. Remember that n represents your days, right? So if n is 25, that means that the amount of hay that he has in his barn at the end of the 25th day is that many tons. Okay?
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
After 25 days, the cows have consumed 32.5 tons. Okay.
Yes. That too will also work. Okay? So then again, one sentence to describe what that means. In the interpretations, there's no one set answer. You want to make sure that whatever your answer is in context of the problem, and you also include the number. Okay? So what I believe it was actually I couldn't see whose name it was that popped up, and I couldn't distinguish the voice because it was quiet. But two of you guys had said two very good sentences, so both of those would work. And then also you can pretty much just take this sentence right here. The amount of hay in the barn at the end of the 25th day is 32.5 tons.
So anytime it says interpret, we just have to write it in a sentence including the number.
Correct. Correct. And lastly, it says how much hay is in the barn at the beginning of August? How much hay is in the barn at the beginning of August? How do I find that?
Do you have to find how many days are in July? Do you use how many days are in July?
Uh-huh.
So I did 31 and I got 19.
So you used 31 for N?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be correct because there are 31 days in July. Okay? So if there's 31 days in July, then this is supposed to be indicative of at the end of a particular day. So once the 31st day is over, the beginning of August starts. So very good. N is equal to 31. So we're going to do U sub 31 and plug it into the explicit formula. And what number did you say you got again?
I got 19.
Very, ooh.
But I think
I got 16.3.
Yeah, it should be 16.3.
Okay.
All right, so
I think
double check.
wrong formula.
Oh, gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. And you see, if you notice, like I am using the explicit formula, I'm plugging in 31 for instances like that. Let's say you knew that N was 31, right? But for whatever reason, between you writing it down and you typing to your calculator to you writing it down as your final answer, something happened. You can still get a method point here by indicating you knew what value you needed to plug in and you plugged it in correctly. So at least out of the potential 2 marks, you at least get 1. You see what I mean? So do not skimp on showing your work. Do not skimp on showing your work. So this is number 1. It says the sequence is defined by U sub n equals 68 minus 5n. So again, we're given the explicit formula, and we have to basically prove that a sequence is arithmetic. What makes a sequence arithmetic? Like what, in your words, what does it mean for a sequence to be arithmetic?
It's the same distances from U sub 1 and U sub 2 and U sub 3.
Exactly.
And so on.
Exactly. So basically, it's your common difference, okay? Well, in order to, determine what your common difference is, you probably want to find a few terms, right? Okay, so let's do that. Let's find our first term. Let's find our second term. And let's find our third term, at least, okay? And so we do that by just plugging in 1, 2, and 3 into that explicit formula right here, okay? So this is very interactive today as we're going over homework. So I want your calculators nearby, whether they're graphing or scientific or your phone, okay? And be ready because I'm going to call on you guys, all right? Calling you guys randomly. So, now remember my Samanthas. Remember, one of y'all is Sam, one of y'all Samantha. So if I say Sam, hopefully you know which one I'm talking about, okay? So Samantha, when I plug in 1, what do I get?
63.
I'm going to get 63. And then Sam, when I plug in 2, what do I get?
58.
58. All right. And McKenna, what do I get when I plug in 3?
53.
53. Okay. So by doing this, I have found what my first term was. So there's part B. And then once I get D, I'll have part B done. But now I need to prove that it's arithmetic. Proving is like a show problem, okay? Show that the common difference when you subtract your second term from your first term is the same thing as if you did your third term from your second term. So that's 58 minus 63 should be equal to 53 minus 58. And we get -5 here as well as -5. Therefore, it's arithmetic. Now, this particular part you did not have to submit into Schoology, but if this was a question like on a test or something like that, that's the work that you want to do. That's the work that you want to accompany with it, okay? So then D is going to be equal to -5. And again, the number that's attached to the variable in the explicit formula is also your common difference. Take your notes as you need to so you don't forget. Now I need to find my 37th term. Even if you couldn't get A or B, you could have at least gotten C because I gave you the explicit formula. All you had to do was plug 37 into this explicit formula to find what that 37th term was. Okay? So we're plugging it in, plugging in 37. We're gonna do 68 minus 5 times 37. And Shania, what do we get for My 37th term.
Negative 117.
You said negative 117?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I gotta come like super close because my air is on. It's hot in here. So if I ask you to repeat, just do it for me because I'm struggling to try to hear y'all. It's not y'all, it's just everything around me.
Miss Anderson,
Yes, ma'am.
on the homework, like, I don't know if like there was like a different copy or something, but the actual sequence didn't copy onto the homework.
Like it was it like a broken picture type icon?
Like, it didn't have a 68 minus 5n, so I just didn't do it because of that.
Okay. So I did post the actual like hard copy of the homework up there. So if anything, I'll always do the hard copy homework first. So then that way you can like pretty much once it comes to the submitting, all you have to do is just transfer the questions over because it will go in a sequential order.
Okay, I just didn't know because there was no like sequence to do it on, so I didn't really know like what to do. But
Yeah.
now I understand.
Okay. And anytime too, just shoot me a message, and I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Preferred way Schoology messages?
One more time.
Is your preferred way of communication Schoology messages?
Either Schoology message or a text message. I thought I gave y'all my cell phone number at the beginning of the year. If I didn't, I will make sure I send it again, or you can send me a text.
Okay.
So then you want to state the first term of the sequence, which is less than negative 200. So you want the first term of the sequence, which is going to be less than negative 200, which means you're looking for n. You are looking for the value of n when u sub n is equal to negative 200. Okay? So negative 200 is equal to 68 minus 5n. So remember, n represents the number of terms, and I'm looking for the term that's going to be less than that. So do a little bit of algebra, subtract 68 from both sides, divide both sides by negative 5, and n is equal to a 53.6. Question to the class. If n is supposed to be your number of terms, is there such a thing as a 53rd.6 term?
No.
No. So that means that, what does that mean?
You'd have to round it.
I heard something faintly.
You have to round it.
You are going to have to round it. To what? Is it going to be 53 or is it going to be 54?
54.
It's going to be 54, exactly. And your number of terms should always be a whole number, and they should always be positive. So problems like this, yes, there will be times when it ends up being a decimal, but you're looking for the term in which that number in the sequence is going to be less than negative 200. And so that would be your 54th term. If you ever question it, you can always plug in 53 and 54 to see which one actually is going to be less than negative 200. Questions on number 1? Let's see. I know number 1 was missed a lot and number 2 was missed a lot. So after I go over 1 and 2, just to make sure that I get the ones that you were like, oh, I really want to see this one worked out. After number 2, you guys let me know which one you really want to see after I do number 2. So number 2 says find k if 3k, k minus 2, and k plus 7 are consecutive terms in the arithmetic sequence. Consecutive, what does that mean? Anyone?
In a row.
In a row. So this is your first term. This entire expression is your second, and this entire expression is your third. And it's in an arithmetic sequence. I asked you this on the last question. In order for something to be arithmetic, what has to be true?
The common difference, the same.
The common difference has to be the same. And remember, we find the common difference. Wow, can I talk today? We find the common difference how? How do I find the common difference? Aiden, how do I find the common difference? Like in general.
You should have a term from the previous term.
Exactly. So that means that my second term minus my first term should be the exact same as when I subtract my third term from my second term. And using that, I can basically set up an equation to find the value of k. My second term, which is k minus 2, subtracted from my first term. Let me put these in parentheses. And then my third term, subtracted from my second. I'm using these parentheses for a reason. Why do you think I'm using these parentheses? What do you?
So that you don't use it as a linear expression or something.
No, not necessarily. It'll still be a linear expression, but when you look at what I have on that second line in the orange, and that on the right side of that equation, that minus k minus 2, what am I gonna have to do with that that minus?
Turn into an addition sign.
With the 2, right? With that negative 2, I'm gonna have to distribute it over. A lot of times students forget that if you're subtracting an expression, you have to carry that negative over to each term in that expression. So you want to be careful about that. For the first one, since 3k is just one term in the expression, I don't have to worry about distributing it. However, on the right side, it's going to be a minus k and then a plus 2. So just be careful here. After that, I can combine like terms. My k's cancel out on the right side. And then I can solve for k. I'll add 2 to get negative 2k equals 11. And then I'll divide by negative 2. And k is either negative 11 over 2 if you leave the answer exact, or if you did convert to a decimal, it should have been negative 5.5. So let's take a look at 10C. It says, consider the arithmetic sequence 2, 19, 26, 33. This is very much arithmetic with a common difference of what? A common difference of what, Kyle?
7.
Of 7. Okay. So my common difference is 7. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need that at some point. Yes. I am going to need that, especially for C, because it asks me to find the sum of the first n terms. Sorry, it doesn't ask me to find the sum. It tells me that the sum of the first n terms is 915, and we have to find the value of n. Okay? Now, remember, when we were talking about sum, there were two formulas. There was the long one. Okay? There was this one. And then there was this one. For this particular problem, which one's going to be better? Option 1 or option 2?
Option 2.
I say option 1 because you know the difference.
That's true. We do know the difference. We also know our first term. The only downside about option 2 is this piece right here. Remember, this piece right here represents the last term of the sequence. And unfortunately, since we don't know the value of n, we don't technically know what the last term is. So the one we want to use here is the first one. Remember, S sub n together represents the sum of however many terms, so that's going to be 915. We're going to have n over 2 then 2 times u1, which was 12, plus n minus 1 times d, which was 7. And now we have to solve for n. Questions up to this point? Okay. So it's going to be 915 is equal to n over 2, 24 plus 7n minus 7. I just distributed. I'm going to combine like terms. This becomes 17 plus 7n. And now I'm actually, instead of distributing the n over 2, instead of distributing that, I'm actually going to multiply both sides by 2. I'm going to do that. By multiplying both sides by 2, I'm going to be able to get rid of the fraction on the right-hand side. Okay? I'm going to be able to get rid of the fraction on the right-hand side. This is a multiplication, not an x, okay? This right here, this is some prior knowledge stuff. Because basically what we're doing is we're solving this equation, and this equation just so happens to be a quadratic, okay? 915 times 2 is 1830. Confirmation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then I can distribute over the n to get 17n plus 7n squared. Remember, n times n is n squared, or, it's variable times a variable. You add the exponent, so that's how you get squared. And now this becomes nothing but a good old quadratic. You're going to hear me say that often. Nothing but a good old quadratic.
Miss Anderson, how'd you get 17n plus 7n squared?
Back here, when I multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that denominator, I distributed over the n to the 17 and to the 7n. And now to solve this quadratic, whenever you're solving a quadratic, you always want to make sure everything is on one side. So I'm going to subtract 1830 to the other side, and I'm going to put it in order like how a quadratic normally is. So that's going to be 0 equals 7n squared plus 17n minus 1830. Okay? Let's test your prior knowledge. There are different ways to solve a quadratic. Does anybody remember what ways there were to solve a quadratic?
The X method.
Right, that X method, also known as factoring. What other methods?
The X.
The what? I missed it. Nobody remembers? Oh, Lord.
The X thing.
The X thing is factoring. Mm-hmm. It is factoring. Now my question is, do y'all remember that X method?
Isn't it A times C, and then you have to figure out multiples that add up to B?
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what is 7 times negative 1830? It's going to be big. What's that? What's 7 times negative 1830?
Negative 12,810.
So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me this number here that also are going to add up to be that number down there. This is the algebraic way to do this, okay? It's kind of hard to find two numbers that multiply to give you negative 12 12,810 that add together give you 17. So in problems like this, you can always use your calculator to do this, okay? And by using your calculator, it's going to do the work for you. What you want to do in your graphing calculator is you want to click the y equals button, okay? And what you want to do is you want to type in the left side of your equation into y1 and the right side of your equation into y2. Now, if you never used a graphing calculator, don't worry, it gets easier the more you use it. The clear button gets rid of everything. And then you type in 0 and enter. So the left side's into your y1. And then you want to type the other equation into y2. We can't use n in the graphing calculator, so we use x. That's going to be 7x. Okay, if you notice my calculator highlights red, so you see what I'm clicking. And then the square button.
I'm not seeing anything on the screen.
Oh, that's right, because I am. Oh, thank you for saying that, because I just realized I'm only sharing that one screen. Okay, so what you want to do is, I'll have to start over. Okay, what you want to do is you want to click your y equals button, and then you want to type your left side into y1, your right side into y2. So then you'll click 0 and then enter, and then you want to get the quadratic equation into y2. So in this calculator, you can't use any other variable besides x to represent your independent variable, so we won't be able to do n squared, we'll have to do x squared. So I'll click 7x and then squared. All my buttons highlight as I do the problem, so you'll be able to see it. Then plus 17x minus 1830. Again, I can't use n, I'll have to use x. Now when I do this, to graph it, that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm looking to see basically where 0 intersects with this quadratic. And depending on what you've done in your calculator in the past, who knows what your window might be, like what is actually going to show. So what I always like to do is I always like to go to zoom and then 6. Zoom 6 always takes me back to a standard window, so that way I can see. The blue line for me represents the first equation, and then the second equation will be red. As we can see, we cannot see it at this point. So that means we're going to have to adjust our window to make sure I can see this quadratic. So what I want to do, one option to do that to see where my quadratic is, I can press zoom and then go all the way down to option 0. Option 0 is called zoom fit, and what it does is it basically takes whichever equations you put into your calculator, it basically is going to fit it into your screen. So when you do zoom fit, there's the 0, y equals 0, and then there's your 7x squared plus 17x minus 1830. Now that I can see it, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for where this red line intersects this blue line. So that means I'm going to have to open up my x window a little bit bigger. When I go to my window, you see it's changed a little bit. I want to open up my x max. Okay, I want to look at more of my positive x values. What number? I'm just going to say 50 to start with. And if you're like, how do I know exactly how big I need to open up my window? To be honest, you're going to have to kind of like just play with the numbers a little bit until you actually see what it is that you're looking for. And as I can see from this picture, by opening it up to 50, I'm able to see where the red line intersects the blue line. So that point is what I'm looking for. I want to know what the value of n is, or in other words, that value of x where they intersect. So from here, I'm going to click the second button. Then I'm going to click the trace button. I'm going to go down to option 5, which is intersect. So I can either go down to 5 and click enter, or I can just click the number 5. And it's going to ask me for the first curve. You want to move the cursor close to that intersection point. And once it's close, it doesn't have to be necessarily on it, just close enough to it. You're going to click enter 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. And what happens is the calculator does all the work to find that value of x where they intersect. X is equal to 15, which means that n is equal to 15. Okay? Now there is another point, where the quadratic also hits that line, But remember, n has to be a positive number. N has to be a positive number. So that intersection point that's somewhere over here to represent that part, we don't want that one because it's negative. And and this value is supposed to represent a number of terms. So we only want that positive value over there. So our answer, n, was equal to 15. We'll do more practice with the calculator so you guys can get comfortable, but this was just your first experience with it.